This is the Hardy Boys tongue and groove installation video. We talk a lot about Element Stain Series installation and show it Element Stain Series installation going on throughout, but no, all these processes are for both the tongue and groove and the ESS. So what's the best site setup for Element Stain Series? Number one, it's very important that you survey your site, talk to the contractor, look where you're gonna store it. Not because it's fragile, but because it's valuable, okay? So you wanna put it in a clean, safe, dry area so people aren't stacking stuff on top of it, working on top of it. And the other thing you wanna do is before you're putting it up, now this is an exterior product, so you can keep it outside. It's not gonna ruin it. But what I always tell my installers is, guys, do not put the Element Stain Series out in the sun prior to installing it. And there's a reason why, because it's cooking. It's sitting in that sun cooking. And like everything in the world, it absorbs. That's just what happens with products. They absorb the heat. And then you're basically giving thermal expansion to the PVC and then flipping it up, cutting it, putting it on a ceiling that will never see the light of day because it's on a ceiling, number one, so it can never get to that same temperature. Now, as you can see, these guys took the materials that were sitting out in the sun and they brought them up to their work areas and left them overnight to acclimate. Acclimating the material is very important because, like I said, if you have it out in the sun and it's absorbing that heat and so it goes to 120 degrees, it'll never be 120 degrees again. So bringing the materials to an area where it can get acclimated is hugely important. The Loctite PL3X is what we use when we start to put the boards up. They put this on the back of the board just to help eliminate movement. You know, materials that are installed all want to move in the environment, the temperature. So this locks it in, just like a wood flooring would. Like the way they glue it down to the plywood on a wood floor, we're gluing this down to the plywood on our ceilings or our trusses. If you're going over a truss, you just put the glue on the truss and then put this into it. But this is a really good trick to making the install better. The other thing is making sure that your work area is clean, making sure other trades aren't going to be working around it, and telling other trades, hey, this is a finished product, so I really want to put this up towards the end. So if other people are making a mess, they're not making a mess of this beautifully finished product. The reality is this, when it goes up, it is 100% done, because part of the installation instructions is to wipe it off and clean your fingerprints as you go. So you're really giving the finished product its final look. When you get down off your scaffolding and roll away the tools and you're leaving that ceiling, it's done. So these are just little things that I think are tremendously important in the installation world of Element Stain Series. So the spacing on your nail pattern is going to be based on your subframing, whether you're going over metal studs and plywood or you're going over plywood over trusses. The trusses being at 24-ounce center and the metal studs being 16-ounce center. So follow your subframing and then on the other direction, be 8-inch on center going across the board. And at the edge, you want to have a maximum of 2 inches, but typically be at like right along the edge at 3/4 to 1 inch. One of the most important things is doing your layout. So you're going to want to take your measurements from the edge of your working area over to your finishing area and do your layout. You might want to snap some lines, take measurements, because you want to confirm. You might need to start with a rip in order to finish without having a very small piece on the other end. You got to do that and double check, because you can work all the way over and have your last 5-inch board and then have a 1-inch spot, which is going to be really hard to fill, or even smaller, a 1/2-inch spot. And then you're kind of really messed up. So you want to check all your ceilings every time and double check your layouts. The way we do it at Hardy Boys is we use plywood, whether we're going over metal framing or trusses, and we do that so we can get better usage of our material, but also so we can apply adhesive and glue the boards to the plywood and put our seams wherever we want. So we're going to get the best usage of our material, best install, and we're going to really put our seams wherever we want and do a better layout for our project. So you always want to dry fit your boards, especially when you make a cut before you install and put the glue on. You want to make sure the board's ready to be glued onto its location. You also want to double check the seams and just make sure it's got a nice, tight, clean fit. As you can see, these guys are using the exterior grade adhesive and they're putting it in blots going down the board. You can also do an 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch bead swirled down the length of the board. Do not use hammers. You must use a finisher's mallet and the red side only. That way you will not ding or damage this material. So when installing a lifetime product, you definitely want to use a high quality, long lasting nail. And the best you can use is a 3/16 stainless steel finish nail. Now, these guys are using 18 gauge, which we use on most of our jobs. That's the smallest nail you can use. You can also use a 16 gauge or a 15 gauge. These nails must be installed 8 inches on center going down the board and install 1 inch from the end of the board or at the seam through the face of the miter. It's really important when you're nailing these boards how you put the angle of the gun, because what you don't want to do is have the nails exposed in the gap, and you don't want to have them to where the board moves. So you want to shoot the gun so when you're shooting it this way, it's sucking it onto the other board and keeping it tight so you don't have any play. So when you're taking the gun, you take this tip, you put it in the center and shoot it there. So what that does is it's hiding it now up in that joint. So you're not gonna see that. When I put the nail, then you see it. You won't see it in the gap when you're looking around. If you put it down, you'll see this nail head. That nail head will shine when you're putting these together. So you really got to make sure that you're using this, put it at the angle, at the bevel or the notch, and then it disappears by the next board. That's why we have a blind nail. There's no exposed nails except for when you have a last board and you're just finishing and you have to nail it at the back of the wall. And that's what the touch-up kit's for. But everything else on this system, as you see in the video, is blind nail. So when you're laying out a ceiling, you want to confirm that the light fixtures and speakers are in their proper locations. You also want to make sure that they're adjusted for the height of your plywood and your 3/4 inch TNG. Very important, because when you get to that location, adjusting the light fixture may require you to remove material. When installing ESS, you must have a minimum of an 1/8 inch to a 1/4 inch away from the wall, for allowing for expansion and contraction. What we're doing here is we're putting a 45 miter for our seam. Then we're applying touch-up stain. So if there's ever a micro movement of the seam, this will be a gray line instead of a white line. Okay, so you always must touch up every seam. No matter what kind of seam you have to touch up the bottom of the board, where the stain side you want to touch up. 705 Weld On is what we use. When this dries, it dries hard as a rock and your joint is welded. One little trick is you always have to shake this up. So if it comes out clear, when you're putting glue on and it comes out clear, then it's not mixed. It needs to be a cloudy white. So when you're putting it on, you want to just put a very small amount. It's very viscous. Don't let it run all over. Always put it at the top of the board so it does not run down onto your finish. This glue is a solvent. It will destroy the stain. So using our custom-made biscuit joints is a really cool option. I think it adds for strength and durability of the seam, and it's something that I highly recommend, but it's not a must-do procedure. We're taking a router, routing out a 1/4 inch joint across the opening, and then taking our 3 inch wide by 3/4 by 1/4 inch biscuit joint and gluing it in, and then gluing it at the seam during install. Make sure that you do not put too much glue on and get it squeezing out onto the finish. All right, so the takeaway on this video really is, number one, I want you to put the material in the right spot, set up in a nice, clean, safe place. I want you to make sure that you don't thermally expand it, so keep it to where it's acclimated before you put it up. Do your site layouts. Make sure you treat this like a finished product. You know, definitely use a finisher's mallet. Do not use a hammer on this because you will dent and damage the boards. Also make sure you're installing with a 3/16 stainless steel nail. It's very important. The joints all must get touch-up paint at the bottom of the miter for all your seams. You also have to glue each joint with the 705 Weld On, and make sure that you do not get the glue on the face, because any solvent on this face will destroy the finish. So you have to be very careful with that. And most importantly, as you're going through the job, please take a white clean rag and wipe all your fingerprints on it. If you have to use a little Dawn soap and water and just a real moist, light finish, just rub it off and then dry it. But getting this clean is the most important part when you're done, because you are delivering the finished product.